For a lot of folks in your grandparents' generation, retirement felt guaranteed. Once they stopped working, a check arrived like clockwork, every single month. They didn't have to stress over which mutual funds to pick. They never had to sit at a kitchen table and guess exactly how many years their savings needed to hold out. The deal was straightforward. You stayed loyal, you put in your decades of work, and your company took care of you when it was time to step away. That predictability functioned as the anchor for the American working class. People built their entire lives around the expectation that the money would simply be there. If you have a job right now, there is a very good chance nobody is making that promise to you. Not your employer, and definitely not in the way people once assumed. The system that automatically generated that monthly retirement check quietly faded away. And the frustrating part is, most workers never received a clear explanation of what actually took its place. My name is Alex. When I started my career, I assumed retirement was something that naturally happened if you clocked in enough years. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize nobody was building a safety net on my behalf. I had to figure the math out and construct it entirely from scratch. The feeling that the ground shifted beneath you is accurate. The mechanics of financial survival moved from the company's ledger to your own. For decades, millions of workers had what is called a pension, officially known as a defined benefit plan. A defined benefit plan is an employer-sponsored retirement account where your company promises you a specific monthly payment for the rest of your life, usually after 20 or 30 years of service. Under that system, the company handled all the investing. Their accounting departments crunched the numbers and managed the portfolio. This diagram shows how that worked. If the stock market had a rough year, crashing down toward those savings, the company's balance sheet took the hit. The individual worker remained completely insulated. Even during a severe recession, the promised monthly check stayed perfectly flat and consistent. A traditional pension functioned as a massive shock absorber. The corporation held all the financial risk. Today, most private sector workers get a 401k. A 401k is a retirement savings plan where employees contribute a portion of their own paychecks to investment accounts. It is a different financial arrangement from a pension. You are now the one putting in the money. You are the one clicking through menus to choose the specific mutual funds. Watch the diagram now. The corporate shield vanishes and the full weight of market volatility lands on you. If the market takes a dive right before you retire, your account balance drops with it. This is a crisis you solve entirely on your own. The inherent mathematical risk of funding a 30-year retirement did not vanish from the economy. It simply moved off of the corporate balance sheets and directly onto the shoulders of the working class. As a result of that transfer, everyday people suddenly found themselves holding an enormous financial responsibility. Yet nobody ever sat us down in a classroom to explain how retirement investing actually works. Instead of an education, you probably got a stack of paperwork on your first day at a new job. You picked some target date options or index funds you barely understood, and you hoped for the best. If the whole topic feels overwhelming, you are not being careless with your money. The system handed everyone a highly technical task that requires actual expertise, but provided zero guidance on how to execute it. But here is the good news. Once you recognize how the rules operate today, you can absolutely build a secure retirement. It just takes a much more active approach than your grandparents needed. I will give you the first step right now. Log into your retirement account this week, whether that is a 401k through your employer or an IRA you opened on your own. An IRA is an individual retirement account that offers tax advantages for retirement savings outside of an employer plan. If you do not have one, make opening one your goal for the week. This interface shows the two metrics you need to check first. Look at the bar chart to see exactly how much money you are contributing each month. Then, look at the pie chart to see what specific investment funds actually hold your cash. Most people signed up on autopilot years ago. You need to verify if those old choices still align with the math you need to hit your targets. Visibility is the requirement for control. You cannot fix a financial trajectory you refuse to look at. Taking these 10 minutes is the first step to rebuilding the foundation the system took away. For much of the 20th century, retirement for the American worker ran on a straightforward contract. You gave a company your best working years, and in return, they gave you a steady paycheck while you were on the clock. and a guaranteed pension after you stopped. The logistics behind the scenes were entirely the company's responsibility. They set the money aside, they chose the investments, and managed all the accounting details. When you finally reached retirement age, you received a predictable, reliable check every single month. If the stock market took a dive or those internal investments underperformed, it did not affect your payout. The company was still legally obligated to deliver the exact amount they promised. The defining feature of this era was that your employer absorbed all the financial risk of your old age. In the late 1970s, a minor update to the tax code introduced a new provision. It eventually became known as the 401k. Initially, it was a loophole. It was not designed, nor was it widely viewed by the public as a true replacement for a traditional pension. Over time, corporate accountants and executives realized this obscure rule could be repurposed to permanently alter how they handled employee retirement. Maintaining a traditional pension is expensive. It requires companies to make massive funding promises that stretch decades into the future, and it keeps all the investment risk permanently sitting on the corporate ledger. By adopting the 401k model, corporations found a perfectly legal, highly profitable exit strategy from the massive financial liability of funding their workers' later years. Under this new system, the mechanics of saving completely reversed. First, the employee was now required to contribute their own money to build the account. Second, the worker became entirely responsible for choosing and managing the investments within that account. This diagram shows how the risk burden moved. Traditionally, the employer carried the heavy load. Now, their role shrank to an optional contribution. Most importantly, it removed the guaranteed payout. Your retirement income is now dictated entirely by how well your chosen investments performed. Corporations successfully transferred complex financial risk off their balance sheets and placed it directly onto the shoulders of untrained workers. Think of a traditional pension like sitting down at a restaurant that promises your entire meal is covered, regardless of what happens to the price of the ingredients. A 401k is more like being handed a gift card at the door. It helps, but it guarantees absolutely nothing about covering the final check. This transition happened rapidly and with almost no guidance. Workers were simply handed a stack of paperwork, a menu of investment options, left in total silence without any real financial training. As the new accounts gained traction, large employers moved quickly to freeze or close down their existing pension plans, locking in their new, lower-risk profile. Within a single generation, a guaranteed institutional safety net disappeared. In its place, millions of people were left to navigate a do-it-yourself retirement system completely unsupported. This leaves the government's role. For decades, Social Security was designed to be one specific piece of a worker's retirement income. There is a persistent public misconception about how this program works. Social Security was mathematically constructed to act as an income floor to keep retirees out of poverty. It was never intended to be a full replacement plan for your working salary. Because it functions strictly as a baseline, a massive mathematical gap exists between that Social Security floor and a retiree's actual cost of living. Treating a basic government floor as a primary strategy creates a severe financial void. The individual is now completely responsible for filling that gap on their own. This diagram illustrates the original blueprint of 20th century retirement, often called the three-legged stool. This structure was supported by an equal distribution of weight across three pillars: an employer pension, government Social Security, and personal savings. But as corporate pensions vanished from the private sector, the strongest leg of that stool was removed. To prevent a total collapse of your retirement income, the personal savings leg now has to expand to bear almost the entire weight of your future. Carrying that impossible weight is exactly why planning for retirement feels incredibly stressful today, even for people who are diligently putting money away every month. The anxiety you feel is not a personal failure. It is the mathematical reality of trying to survive a dismantled system. Now that you see exactly how the math changed, we can look at what you need to stop doing to keep that stress from getting worse. When people think about the dangers to their retirement, they usually picture a sudden market crash wiping out their life savings. But the most severe damage usually comes from the quiet, everyday financial choices people make without even realizing it. Financial growth relies on compounding, the process where your investment returns generate their own returns over time. These hidden mistakes also compound, except in the wrong direction. A minor misstep in your 20s or 30s actively drains decades of potential wealth. To secure a comfortable retirement, we have to identify and eliminate these specific habits before their mathematical damage becomes impossible to reverse. The first habit to break is telling yourself you will start later. When you are young, retirement feels like a problem for a completely different, much older version of yourself. But compounding operates on a clock. On the left, starting with $200 a month at age 25 gives that money decades to generate cascading returns. On the right, waiting until age 35 creates a massive, unfillable visual gap in wealth. That 10-year mathematical deficit is practically impossible to close later in life, even if you try to make up for it by saving aggressively in your 40s and 50s. The second habit is treating your dedicated retirement accounts like a readily available emergency fund when money gets tight. Pulling cash from a 401k or an IRA triggers immediate, visible consequences. You are hit with unexpected tax bills and often a stiff early withdrawal penalty. The true cost is much larger. Let's look at a $5,000 withdrawal at age 30. Pulling that money out permanently deletes all the future compound growth those specific dollars would have generated over the next 30 years. Delaying your start time and pulling money out early achieve the exact same negative result. They break the mathematical engine required to build long-term wealth. The third habit is assuming the safest-looking investment option is always the smartest choice, simply because it protects your current balance from dropping. Parking your money in cash or very conservative bonds makes strategic sense if you need to spend it next year. But stretching that extreme caution over a 20 or 30-year timeline creates a unique financial hazard. This graph shows inflation risk in action. Inflation is the rate at which the general prices of goods and services rise. When your money grows too slowly, the rising cost of everyday goods outpaces your savings, quietly eroding your future purchasing power. The fourth habit is abandoning active planning entirely, operating under the assumption that Social Security will cover your needs when the time comes. Social Security is mathematically designed to be a base layer of support. If you treat it as your entire plan, you are left with a massive void between the baseline checks coming in and the actual income you need to survive. Passive reliance on government benefits and a perceived need for total investment safety both guarantee one outcome: a severe shortfall in the capital you will actually have. The fifth habit is comparing your personal retirement progress to the apparent success of your friends or coworkers. Looking at this infographic, we can see why those external comparisons yield useless data. Another person's financial situation is built on variables completely unique to them: different ages, divergent income scales, and entirely different future goals. When you measure yourself against an incompatible benchmark, it creates psychological friction. It tends to push people into reactive panic, where they make rushed investment decisions, or complete action paralysis, where they do nothing at all. Observing other people's financial decisions is a distraction. It actively pulls your focus away from the necessary work of building a customized strategy for your own household. If you recognize any of these habits in your own life, you are not alone, and it does not mean you are irresponsible. Falling victim to these mistakes is incredibly common. The root cause is systemic. Earlier generations often had pensions and did not manage their retirement under the same structural conditions we face today. As a result, these essential financial skills are rarely taught. But once these unseen mathematical pitfalls are clearly identified, navigating around them becomes a highly straightforward process. Now that we see the traps, we can build a secure foundation. Let's walk through this step-by-step plan to reverse these 5 habits and get your retirement strategy back on track. You understand the problem now. You know exactly what changed in the financial landscape and why the old rules no longer apply. You also know the quiet habits that actively work against your wealth. If you followed the earlier tip, you have already logged into your retirement account and checked your current balance. With these numbers in hand, every calculation we make for contribution rates or retirement targets actually connects to your real-world situation rather than a generic estimate. This visibility turns a vague anxiety into a data-driven roadmap. Now that the numbers are on the table, we can start the first of 6 specific adjustments, beginning this week. Step 1. Increase your retirement contribution by exactly 1% of your paycheck. If you are putting in 4% right now, bump it to 5%. Most budgets absorb a 1% change without much friction, especially if you time it around a raise. You will often hear a long-term target of 15% of your income, but that is a guideline, not an overnight requirement. Just keep nudging it upward. Step 2. Put your money in a simple fund that matches your timeline. This graph shows how a target date fund works. If retirement is decades away, it starts with growth-focused investments. Then, as you get closer to your final retirement year, the fund automatically shifts toward more stable assets. If your plan lacks a solid target date option, look at a low-cost broad market index fund. Whichever you choose, check the expense ratio. The expense ratio is the annual fee the fund charges you to manage your money. If your plan's fee looks high compared to alternatives, see if there is a cheaper option available. Step 3. Open a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA is an individual retirement account that you control directly, completely separate from anything your employer offers. You fund it with money you have already paid taxes on. Because you pay taxes up front, your qualified withdrawals in retirement are generally tax-free. This gives you tax diversification and an independent layer of security that does not rely on your current job. By completing these 3 actions, you have established a higher contribution, selected a risk-managed fund, and opened a tax-free account. Your trajectory has shifted from passive observer to active builder. Step 4. Calculate a rough target number. This equation shows a common starting point. Take what you spend in a single year right now and multiply it by 25. That gives you a ballpark estimate of the total investments needed to support your current lifestyle. This is not an exact answer. Your real number depends heavily on your geographic location, your health, and how long your money actually needs to last. But having a concrete target turns a vague worry into a manageable goal. Step 5. Automate every single contribution. This flowchart shows the ideal setup. Your income is split directly into your 401k before you ever see it, while the rest hits your checking account. Then your Roth IRA automatically pulls its share on the exact same day each month. When saving is automatic, it happens without a fresh decision every pay period. You completely remove willpower and decision fatigue from your wealth-building process. Step 6. Put a 15-minute retirement check-in on your calendar once a year. Pick a date easy to remember, like January 1st. During those 15 minutes, review 3 metrics. First, your total amount saved. Second, if your contribution rate matches your income. Third, if your investments match your timeline. Combining a mathematical target with automated routing and a minimal annual review takes the unpredictability out of your future. It becomes a managed system that simply runs in the background. For most workers today, nobody is going to guarantee your retirement. The era of the employer-funded pension is mostly behind us, but that does not mean a comfortable retirement is out of reach. It simply means you need to be intentional, taking control to build it yourself through the steps we just outlined. Even a high salary can still result in a zero balance if the habits of automation and early starts are missing. Security comes from the mathematical advantage of starting now and letting these automated systems run for decades, regardless of where your income starts today. Taking immediate intentional action today is the only guaranteed mechanism for turning the theory of a secure retirement into reality. If this helped you make sense of retirement, leave a like so I know to make more videos that break this down simply. Share this with someone who still assumes retirement will just work itself out, and comment next retirement step below. I post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, so subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.